Welcome to Bittensor Weekly, your source of truth for everything happening in the Bittensor ecosystem. I'm your host, and this is episode 19, Saturday, August 1st, 2026. This is a heavy week. Subnet 24, Quasar, has been publicly accused of publishing a model that is not what it claimed to be. The accusation came from Const himself, backed by an independent audit from another Subnet founder, and the alpha token is in freefall as we record. We also have v440, the biggest emissions restructure since dTAO, and Const's proposal to double the subnet cap. Let's get into it. Story 1. The Quasar Audit. Full disclosure before we start, this story is breaking today, Saturday, August 1st. Facts are moving fast. What we cover here is verified against sources at the time of recording. Some pieces will shift by Monday. Here is the timeline. On July 31st, the Novelty Search podcast published a long interview with the SILX AI team, who operate Quasar at Subnet 24. The SILX CTO, Iyad Goma, claimed the team had trained a 120 billion parameter model from scratch on Bittensor using 120 H200 GPUs on 7.5 trillion tokens, achieving state-of-the-art performance on a 5 million token context window. Big claim, delivered on a podcast with a wide audience. The following day, an audit dropped. The auditor is Christopher Subia-Waud, publishing under the handle Wandering Weights. Chris is not an anonymous troll. He holds a PhD in AI. He is the founder of Gradients at Subnet 56, a legitimate Bittensor subnet operated by Rayon Labs. He has appeared on Bittensor Revenue Search and Bittensor Guru podcasts, and this matters. His subnet, Gradients, had recently partnered with Quasar as part of the summer collaboration between subnets 56, 3, and 24, so he had insider technical exposure to the actual work. Chris's finding, per community reporting of the audit, the model Quasar attributes to itself on Hugging Face appears to be Inclusion AI's open-source Ling Mini Base 2.0, a checkpoint trained on 20 trillion tokens by Ant Group, with the credit metadata stripped, 96% identical according to the audit. Const, co-founder of Bittensor, publicly amplified the audit and endorsed the conclusion. Now the smoking gun that predates this whole audit. On SILX AI's own Hugging Face page for an earlier model called Quasar 10 billion, the model card states, in the team's own words, quote, "These models are not pre-trained by the SILX AI team, but are modifications of open-source models," unquote, and lists QN 3.59 billion base as the underlying architecture. That admission has been public for months. Anybody due diligencing this subnet before this week could have read that themselves. There are more red flags. SILX AI was founded in February 2024. The public GitHub repository for the Quasar attention paper lists exactly one contributor, Iyad Goma himself, not a lab of 10 researchers, one person. The company's LinkedIn footprint places Iyad in Cairo, and SILX describes itself as the first AI research lab in the MENA region.
And SILX has changed its story about the flagship model at least 4 times in 8 months. December 2025, Quasar was pitched as a 26 billion parameter 2 million context model. June 2026, Tao.media covered Quasar as an 18 billion mixture of experts. On silxing.com today, the flagship listed is Quasar 3 billion, a 1 billion active mixture of experts. And on the podcast this week, the claim was 120 billion with an 8 billion active mixture of experts. That is not one product evolving. That is 4 different products with 4 different sizes. Any one of those numbers could be right. All 4 cannot be. Parameter mismatch on the audit. The alleged source, Inclusion AI's Ling Mini Base, is a 16 billion parameter mixture of experts with 1.4 billion active. Quasar's podcast claim was 120 billion with 8 billion active. Those are not the same size. Either the podcast claim was inflated, or the audit is describing weight lineage rather than a byte-for-byte copy. We do not have the raw audit text to confirm which, because Chris's account was suspended shortly after he published. On the suspension, X does not publish specific reasons, but the pattern is well documented. A legitimate account gets a batch of reports, and automated review kicks in, and if the reviewer finds any pretext, the account is suspended pending appeal. Chris shared what looked like 4 wallet addresses attributed to the Quasar team. Under X's rules, that can be flagged as sharing private information about someone else, which is the fastest path to suspension. Coordinated mass reporting by supporters of the accused is the most plausible explanation, We can't prove it. We can note that it happened within hours of the audit going live. Market reaction. Community sources report Subnet 24 Alpha crashed roughly 75% intraday. TAO market cap shows Subnet 24 Alpha at 0.3 cent TAO at recording time. On-chain observers have identified 4 wallets attributed to the Quasar team and report on the order of 800 to 900 TAO sold from those wallets during the drawdown. The conflict of interest angle that deserves airtime. SILX AI's advisor list includes Siam Kidd and Mark Kreezer, principals of the DSV fund. DSV invested in Quasar at launch through the BitStarter raise. Both are also frequent podcast guests and ex-commentators on the Bittensor ecosystem. As of recording time, we have not seen a public statement from either responding to the audit. That silence is a data point. The Quasar team has responded publicly. We have not fully captured that response text in time for this recording. We will cover it next week. The bigger implication. Bittensor is an open incentive network. It cannot filter for honest subnets at the top of the funnel. The protocol's defense against this class of failure is transparency, third-party audits, and market pricing. That defense worked today. Painfully, in real time, but it worked. And it worked because a real subnet founder with technical credibility put his own reputation on the line. That is worth pausing on. Story 2. v440 ships the Emission Gate. While this drama was building the biggest emission restructure since dTAO went live, Monday, July 27th, the v440 upgrade was tagged for mainnet deployment on the RAO Foundation Subtensor repository. On-chain execution runs through a 2 of 2 pseudo multisig, and community reporting has treated the upgrade as effectively rolled out.
The mechanic is called the Emission Gate. The protocol computes a threshold called theta, recalculated every 360 blocks. Subnets above theta keep close to full emissions. Subnets at the threshold lose roughly half. Subnets below theta see emissions decay rapidly, and that tau is redirected up to subnets above the line, not burned. The numbers. The bottom 94 subnets went from 38.4% of network emissions to 12.5%. The top 8 subnets went from 32.8% to 52.7%. Shoots at subnet 64 with a 9.8% share of demand now receives 16.6% of emissions after redistribution. Cross-reference this with the Quasar story. Under v440, subnets that lose credibility lose emissions on top of losing token price, 2 axes accountability. If v440 had shipped a month earlier, subnet 24 would already be feeling the emissions pressure to match the token pressure it is feeling now. Story 3. Const posts doubling the subnet cap. Same day as v440, Const posted in Discord that he is discussing raising the network subnet cap from 128 to 256. Registration cost is currently around $229,000, and Const noted teams are selling more than 50% of first-year emissions just to pay for a slot. The bet is that Gate collapses that cost by killing rent to unproductive subnets, at which point the cap can safely rise. Market check. Live from MEXC at recording time, TAO is trading at $193.69, 24-hour change of 0.20%, 24-hour range 186.65 to 195.04. 7-day change roughly flat. Market cap $2.13 billion on 11.02 million TAO circulating. Given what just happened at Subnet 24, this week's spotlight is not another pitch, it is a working counterexample. Affine, Subnet 120. Affine runs a reinforcement learning competition specifically aimed at reasoning models. Miners fine-tune large language models on hard reasoning tasks. Validators score which fine-tunes produce better results on held-out benchmarks. Winning weights get published on Hugging Face for anyone to inspect and use. Every element that failed at Quasar has a working defense at Affine. Transparency of output. Affine's winning models go public on Hugging Face as safe tensors weights. Anyone can download the artifact and rerun the benchmarks. There is no gap between claim and artifact. Base model disclosure. Affine is honest about which upstream model they are extending. The current work is on the Q13 family. Public, verifiable, not hidden behind marketing language. Evaluation is on-chain. Validators score against block-seeded prompt sets. Miners cannot know which prompts they will be scored on. That constraint is what makes gaming hard. Numbers. Affine token trading around 5.5 hundredths of 1 TAO, roughly 11 cents in dollar terms. Market cap in the $40 to $43 billion range. Emission share around 9.7% this week, comfortably above the v440 gate. 2-month uptrend in ranking. The gate rewrite just insulated its emissions from the erosion hitting the bottom of the network. The risks are real. Reasoning benchmarks attract fine-tunes that overfit to the specific eval set. If Affine's validators cannot detect that pattern, quality decays fast.
If frontier open-weight releases from teams like QN slow down, the ceiling drops with them.
But at a moment when Subnet 24 is imploding on a credibility failure, Subnet 120 is a useful benchmark for what the design of Bittensor is supposed to look like. Ship the artifact, disclose the base, score on chain. Educational segment. Given this week's story, we walk through how you, as a token holder, can do a first-pass check on whether Subnet is actually building what it claims. 4 checks. None of them require you to be a machine learning engineer. 1. Find the Subnet's Hugging Face organization and open the model card of their headline model. Look for a field called Base Model. If the base model is another team's open source release, the Subnet is fine-tuning, not pre-training. That is a legitimate strategy, but the pitch and the artifact should agree on which one it is. SILX AI's own Quasar 10 billion card said plainly months ago that the model was a modification of Q1 3.5. That fact should have been priced in long before this week. 2. Cross-reference the parameter count. If the pitch says 120 billion and the safe tensors on Hugging Face add up to 16 billion, you have a discrepancy. Total parameter counts are trivially verifiable from the config file. 3. Ask where the compute came from. Training a genuine frontier model requires a specific quantity of GPU hours on specific hardware. If the team cannot name a compute provider, a GPU count, and a wall clock training time, treat the claim with skepticism. 4. Look for independent evaluation. If the Subnet team is the only party quoting benchmark numbers on their own model, the numbers are effectively marketing. Wait for a third-party rerun, an LM eval hards pass, or a Hugging Face community leaderboard before you size a position. And a 5th check we are adding this week. Look at who advises the project. If the same names show up on the advisor page, the fund page, and the podcast circuit, the ecosystem's independent voices may not be as independent as you think. That is not a rule against advisors. It is a reason to weight independent third-party audits above the ecosystem's own commentary. That is it for this week. Big story, still unfolding. If you found this useful, subscribe and hit the bell. I'll see you next Saturday.